Swami Sri Yukteswar, our beloved Gurudeva, Paramahansa Yoganandaji, saints of all religions, beloved Swamiji, we humbly bow before you all. Great Masters, open our hearts that we feel filled with only our love for thee. Help that love to remove all doubt that may come to us at any time that there is anything in the world more powerful than thee, more magnetic than thee, anything that could take us away from thee. Help us to stay deeply attuned to your guiding presence in all that we do, and to know that under no circumstance would you ever leave us, could you ever forget about us, for we are thine. Om, peace, amen.
Come out of the darkness, Mother, bathe me in thy light, bathe me in thy light. Come out of the darkness, Mother, bathe me in thy light, bathe me in thy light. Come out of the darkness, Mother, bathe me in thy light. Come out of the darkness, Mother, bathe me in thy light, bathe me in thy light. Come out of the
Let's meditate together now for a few minutes, imagining ourselves being bathed in the light of the Divine Mother. We just meditate for a few minutes on these evenings, so let's do our best to become very focused, very still, very aware of energy rising from our heart to the point between the eyebrows, very quickly. Om, peace, Amen.
Come here while I sing you of emerald hills, of valleys and meadows so fair, that all who have seen them have carried away memories in their hearts, friends, like the lilacs of May. Oh, my song is the story of the lilacs of May. My song is the story of deer on the hills, of larks that soar seeking the sun, of nightingales lifting the curtain of night, as with music they bring down heaven's blessing of light. Oh, my song is the story of God's blessing of light. Come join me in singing of that emerald isle, of flowers that like jewels besprinkle the lea, of waterfalls eager to embrace the wide sea, as we with our Maker united would be, as we with our Maker reunited would be. Come here while I sing you of emerald hills, of valleys and meadows so fair, that all who have seen them have carried away memories in their hearts, friends, like the lilacs of May. Oh, my song is the story of the lilacs of May.
That song is so sweet. There are many places where both Yogananda and Swamiji talk about our topic for tonight, which is doubt. And they do this in many ways throughout the teachings, Patanjali as well. But one of the things that Master keeps saying in, again, several areas of his writing is how could we experience doubt when we see so much in the world that is there and sort of monumental, big and real and powerful, and yet inexplicable. And he does this particularly. I don't have this in my notes here, but I remember at one point he was talking about how you can see the trees and you can wonder at them and the varieties and the strength, but you can't really explain a tree. Other than the simple science of it, you plant a seed and a tree goes. But when you really let yourself wonder about how it is that trees came into being or grew, you can't quite explain it. It's kind of beyond reason. And he goes on to talk about flowers, just all the different kinds of beautiful flowers sort of blowing in the wind. And it's very, very sweet, actually. At another point, he says, there's billions of tons of mud balls flying through space. It's sort of like, go try and explain that without believing in God, without loving God, but really without that, not just belief, but faith. There are so many things that are so obvious and real but inexplicable. So I just came back to me right now because of a couple of lines of the song. The lilacs of May. I mean, he's just speaking of so much beauty in the world. And again, with that kind of a sweetness, yet he paints a picture for us that's just, it's beyond reason is what it is, which is really almost his whole, all of their whole stories about what it means to really, I want to say believe in God, that's my expression. Trust God, know God, never doubt God is much more how all of these great teachers would say it. And I hear, oh, this is the song we're going to sing tonight, because Swamiji told us to. He paired this emotion with that song. And I would say to myself, really? Emerald Isles, just how can that make any sense? But then as I was listening to it, I thought, oh, he's just talking about the existence of so much magnificence in the universe. Where could it have come from? It's actually much deeper than that, much more subtle. But anyway, that's a good beginning. Let me read to you the Secret of Overcoming Doubt as Swamiji has written it. And I think I cover this, but also I went in a little bit of a different direction with my thinking tonight. So hopefully we'll get to bring it all together. The secret of overcoming doubt is to concentrate on your reasons for gratitude to life and not to focus on all those things which seem to you imperfect. So concentrate on your reasons for gratitude to life and not to focus on all those things which seem to you imperfect. Love other people, love truth. And then Swamiji just says, love. It's bolded, it has an exclamation point after it. Fill your heart with generous sentiments, and doubts will flee like shadows before the sunrise. So at the simplest level, this is saying, whenever you're feeling doubtful, if you rise up into an experience of love and generosity, if you open your heart in that way, that it would be very hard to be doubting at the same time. Doubts will flee like shadows before the sunrise. Swamiji had just an extraordinary way with words, and so often a phrase will just come, a simple phrase like that, will flee like shadows before a sunrise. And you realize that's exactly what happens, but just said so succinctly and with so much beauty in it. So this sentiment of doubt is, it's interesting to try and consider for ourselves. And remember, we're speaking spiritually. Of course, it's the same thing as doubting everything in the world. There are just those people that doubt. I know there's one of our readings that we do every year on a Sunday. I don't remember what it is right now. It might be that line from the Gita where Krishna is saying, I actually have it here, though I don't remember that this is the reading, but let me see if I can. Where Krishna says to Arjuna, he says, the doubter, O Arjuna, is the most miserable of mortals. The doubter is the most miserable of mortals. Interesting phrase. And I don't know if we read that every year. I'm not sure that we actually read that, but it doesn't matter. I know that there's a reading that we do about doubt because there's somebody in my life that it always reminds me of. I always think if I can read them that reading, and if I can just convey it in the right way, they would quit doubting. Of course, that's never the case. And fortunately, I've quit even thinking I should do that, but still they come to mind. But it's interesting to think of, or to realize how much of a case people can make when they want to justify doubt. So Master and Patanjali both talk a lot about what Patanjali calls impediments to yoga. And there's about 12 feelings or thought forms that Patanjali talks about. He lists them. I don't have them right here, but I know that doubt is one of them, and I know that dullness of mind is one of them, which we'll talk about in 4 weeks now. But of all of those, what he calls impediments to yoga, meaning that having this feeling or allowing ourselves to move into this state, and tonight we're talking about doubt. So this state of doubt, if we come there, that we cannot attain the state of yoga, that they're mutually exclusive. And he calls them impediments to yoga, but he's really serious about it. Like if you're going to continue to doubt, you cannot attain that oneness with the divine, which of course is what yoga is. But they speak a lot about constructive doubt, which is one thing, or destructive doubt. So Master's saying to us, doubt, the word doubt is not in and of itself always a negative quality, because constructive doubt is when we really are searching for answers. We could call it in a way questioning. And that's a very, not just reasonable, but it's a good thing for the yogi to do, because if we try and just take anybody else's word for anything, it never works. That's why we cannot learn any lesson until it's precisely our time to learn that lesson. No matter how simple it looks to anybody else. And I've spoken about this quite a bit because it's striking in life, and particularly for those of us who really just came into and have fallen in love with, in a way, helping other people. And of course, there's many of us on this path, and we all do it in different ways, but that idea of serving people, and you see somebody suffering, and you just want to offer them the easy solution, the explanation, that thing which you're certain would just help them out of their misery. But if it's not their time to hear it, it's just impossible. It won't come in. You can't make it work, which is where I was just a couple of minutes ago when I was talking about that friend that I'm always reminded of on this particular Sunday every year, because I watch her and she literally has a deeply furrowed brow from like this, from worrying all the time and from doubting and from questioning. I always feel that I can just see that negativity being imprinted, or that ignorance, because in a way, doubt and mental dullness, I mean, many of these qualities, they're a state of ignorance, of truth, of the divine. And not ignorant like rude ignorant, but ignorant as in unknowing. And I watch this friend, and I just so often want to say, but just listen to me explain it this way, and then you won't have so much doubt. But what I've realized over the years and today found Yogananda's word for it, which is destructive doubt. Because destructive doubt comes in when we are sure that we already know the answer and we come in ready with the argument. We come into an argument, a discussion, meaning not a fighting argument, but a discussion, as if we're questioning. You see people do it, as if they're asking a question, but the truth is they already have the answer ready to give to you, no matter what you say. It happens in many different ways. It happens anytime somebody's not ready to hear truth, and that has just infinite expressions. So there's doubt there, but it's a doubt that's fixed, that's firm, that is committed to doubting, that is not going to expand in any way to maybe be able to absorb other truth. And then there's constructive doubt. And as I said, we could call that questioning or wondering, where a question's asked that's genuine. You really want to know, how could that be? And you ask it with an open mind, ready to hear the answer. And that's constructive. That's that kind of questioning that we've heard many times. Both Yogananda and Swami Kriyananda says it so many times. He would love it when people would question him. He had no problem with that, as long as it was this kind of constructive or mind-opening, not really mind-opening, heart-opening, soul-opening. Because this is another thing about doubt. It can never be neutralized by reason. It can never be, we can't sort of quelch somebody's doubt, or neutralize it is really a better word, by reasoning our way there. So when somebody starts saying, show me, or people come and they have a question, or they're not sure, but they're arguing against something, and they come as if they want to hear something that would convince them otherwise. But you can very often see they don't want to hear something that can convince them otherwise. They've already made up their mind. They're already set with the way they're going. And furthermore, it's silly, because the rational mind isn't going to do it. When people feel strongly about something, it's nearly impossible to reason them out of it. It's not impossible for them to find themselves in a situation where their heart is touched, where their mind kind of bursts open with an awareness, with love, with a knowing. And suddenly they realize, and that's a very meaningful word, that what they were carrying as truth is not really the truth. Or they begin to see a little light, a little, let me think if I can think of this writer and singer's name. I always called him the Canadian Paul Simon. Leon, I'm looking at Lakshmi as if she could help me, but she's probably nowhere near old enough, except she knows a lot of musicians. So anyway, Canadian poet, songwriter. I'm going to think of his name as soon as class is over, and I'm going to tell you next time. He wrote some really amazing music. Leonard Cohen, thank you. Wow, Sai Ganesh told me that. You what? Oh, somebody typed it in the chat. Thank you, I didn't even give you many clues, except the LEO. Leonard Cohen, I used to love his music, but whoever wrote that will know this. He wrote a poem, and then he puts it to music, of course, but he says, there's a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. And it's just such a beautiful juxtaposition for what on the one hand could seem broken, but on the other hand, you realize it's there so that light can come in. Now let me just think of, as I went up to Canada to try and find Leonard Cohen, where I was right before that. Let me see if I can collect my thoughts. Oh, I know why. Because when that happens, when the light starts coming in just that way, that's not really a logical line, as so much of, I mean, you can make it make sense. You can imagine a crack and light coming in, but Leonard Cohen meant that in such a much deeper way than a crack, a physical crack. And even in our mind, in our state of mind, that if we allowed just a little room, then light can come in. I was recently talking with a friend who's just written a book. It's not quite published yet, but it's well on its way, and it will come out. And she was an avowed atheist throughout her life until she was about 50, I think, but a really committed atheist. And, you know, of course, people have been trying to talk her out of it her whole life. She had many friends who were God-loving, many of them really deeply spiritual people, but nobody could get through to her. And she tells the story in this book about how experiences started happening. Things would happen to her that were seemingly impossible. They were just impossible. And then she started being aware that when they happened, she would find herself not just feeling love or loving, but as if she was in love, like resting in love. She had no words for it. The book is written chronologically, so you find her through her diary just waking up. You know, she's recording it all, and now she's published her diary, and you see her fighting it off at first. She was filled with doubt. Doubt just ran her life, and just like Krishna says here, I mean, Krishna says it, Patanjali says it, but Krishna says the doubter is the most miserable of mortals. Why is that? Because in order to stay in a state of doubt, one has to completely stay in an environment where God cannot enter. We have to work at keeping God out, because as soon as our awareness of the divine begins to happen, like it did for this friend of mine, well, there's no denying the truth. And she went to many people saying, what is this? What is happening to me? And people would start telling her, but her mind didn't want to believe it until so many experiences happened. I mean, what great good karma that God just burst through layers of this ignorance, of this state of doubt, of this committed energy to keep God away. And anyway, she awakened, and she's deeply committed on this path. In fact, she doesn't live here in Palo Alto, but deeply committed, a beautiful, just sweet and committed and strong soul. And now she can look like, wow, you know, it sort of wasn't that long ago, 15 years ago at the most, that she was so sure that there was nothing divine, no state of divine love, of super consciousness. And then just slowly, that was just whittled away until she had no choice. And it was almost like God himself just found that little crack and the light came in. I mean, of course he did, and it was no little crack, but it wasn't about reasoning. She had read, I don't know how many books. She had spoken to so many people. There was no argument that was good enough. Now, at its extreme, that's what doubt is. It's just this state of darkness, really, because you're living totally without allowing divine energy to come in. We've created entire scenarios, entire lifetimes where we're allowing, we're insisting that it's our consciousness that decide truth. We will not let in any of that awareness that we are simply manifestations of that, of some other grand, eternal reality. I mean, we have to get back to it, of course. Yogananda very sweetly says somewhere in these teachings, he said, of course you'll get there. And he was talking about the ocean of divine consciousness. And he said, where, just very simply, he says, where else is the wave going to go? And it's just so true. We will make it back there because we have to. But here's what's important for us to think about. It's very easy to look at these states of the extreme. And one could almost wonder, why is she up there even talking about it? We know that God exists. We know these stories. We understand that we're a manifestation of that we're the little wave that's just going to fold back into the ocean. Exactly when we do it, sort of up to us, but we'll do it. And we're all headed there. And we know so much of what I've been talking about. But the problem is, and this is the problem, and this is where we can begin to pay better attention, is that Maya, delusion, ego, is so incredibly subtle that it is really easy for us, shockingly easy, and I would say for myself, frighteningly easy, to be certain that we're knowing the truth when our energy's just a little off. And a little off may as well be, infinite, because as long as it's a little off, as long as it's still following that impediment to yoga, it's an impediment to yoga. We are not going to reach our goal. And it's easy when we get a little wisdom and when we've seen it sort of be truth a few times, when we've seen an inspiration come, heard it, know we heard it, act on it, and it's been real. And the more that happens, it's all too easy to get, arrogance is a strong word, but maybe careless would be a better word, and just start assuming, or we're moving so fast that we forget to take note of, am I acting or reacting or moving based on my mind, or is my ego in the way here? Am I feeling the least bit emotional about where I'm going? Because if I am, truth cannot prevail. And it's, as I said, surprisingly hard to tell the difference at times. Last time I was talking to this friend who wrote the book. I just love it when people do this. And she would say to me, well, I'm sure this doesn't happen to you. And then she goes on, and I just burst out laughing. It's like, are you kidding me? Let me show you the ways. Of course it happens to me. Of course it happens to all of us. But I said to her, would you actually really like me to start telling you how much more work I have to do on the path? First of all, none of us would be here. We wouldn't need a body. We wouldn't be in any of the situations we're in. Were we that perfect? But if we tell ourselves the truth, it's not that long ago, probably, like this afternoon or this morning or yesterday, maybe last week, where our ego actually wound up taking us someplace where we were sure we were seeing the truth. Now, this may not sound like it's about doubt, but remember, Yogananda calls doubt ignorance. He calls meaning ignorance. Ignorance means any time that we can't see the truth, any time we're doubting that it is always God who's in charge, that it is always God acting through us, that we constantly have to be relating to the divine, serving the divine, really bringing our heart back to wanting nothing but what God wants for us. Now, I just finished saying, so far that's proven to be impossible, because we're here, we're all here, but we're headed in that direction, and that is a very good thing. There's a piece that I was reading today, and I don't remember where it came from, but about overcoming doubt. And it's interesting because it was either Swamiji or Yogananda or Patanjali who starts out by talking about what it means to live a simple life, to not want more than we need, to not want to have too many clothes or too much money or more food than we need. And you think, overcoming doubt? Or I thought, and it just goes on like that. And then he winds up talking about how having too much, or having too many desires, or needing too much, or leaning too much into the material world, not just creates, but strengthens doubt, which is ultimately the way that we doubt that God is the doer, that God loves us perfectly, that God would never leave us, that God is acting through us at all times under every circumstance. So it's not just the friend with the furrowed brow or the other friend who was an atheist for most of her life, or these extreme cases. It's easy to talk about these extreme cases because then you get to see the picture, but then we have to get to be more and more and more subtle. so we can see the way doubt plays in ourselves. We can see the ways that we're not totally trusting in God. Because as soon as we completely trust in God, as soon as that's complete for us, we have no doubt. But until then, we're doubting something. We're not sure. Is he really going to catch me if I fall here? Or am I supposed to fall? There's that wonderful story. It just popped in, so let me see if I could pull it up. I think close enough. It's a story about Swami Shankara with a disciple. And if any of you know it, and I don't have the details right, it's okay. The point of the story is clear enough. But he has a disciple who's always worried, and he's trying to teach her not to worry, to trust God. And she comes to him, and he continuously reassures her. This is one of the great teachers of all time. And finally, she comes to him. She can't let go of her fear. And what is fear? But doubt. It's just not believing that God is there watching us and taking care of us. And finally, she says to him, but what if I die? And he says, then die, just like that. And she keeled over and died. He didn't want her to die. It's just, it wasn't her time to learn this lesson, or that's how he was going to teach her the lesson. But all of the ways that we can't believe in God, then we're filled with doubt. Sometimes gross doubt, sometimes subtle. Most of us wouldn't say that we don't believe in God. Most of us wouldn't say that. I mean, why would we be here if that was the case? In this course in particular. No, I doubt any of us would. But I'll bet you all of us have moments where we feel like we're free-falling and we don't have that faith. And really, faith is the other side of doubt. It's exactly that which will obscure, not just obscure, but delete. I can't think of the right word, but like that. When our faith is true, we have no doubt. When it's true faith, then no matter what happens, we believe that God is there. We remember that God loves us. We remember that he couldn't possibly leave us because we are his very own. We are literally made in his image. Where is he going to go? That's like when Swamiji said, our master said, whoever said it, where else is the wave to go? We're one. We're going to find our way back to that oneness at some point. So once we've developed true faith in God, or as we're developing it, and we find ourselves being frightened, and we have to remind ourselves, there's nothing to be afraid of. We find ourselves with somebody telling us something we don't want to hear, and we want to react, and then we say, or we don't even want to react, but we find ourselves reacting, then we feel, there's no reason for me to do that. That's my ego. That's the hold the ego has on me, that reactivity. And I don't want to move from the ego because we don't have complete faith in God. I remember many, but I've only been living in the community, for 21 years now, 21, whatever it is. But I was having a talk with Asha once, and she was telling me something. I'm sure it was absolute, complete truth. And I said to her, I know that. I really know that. And she said, no, if you really knew it, you wouldn't be behaving the way you're behaving. It was hard to hear, but it was the truth. That's the difference between thinking something, wishing you knew it, and really knowing it. What we're looking to really know is that everything that we need in life, everything. That's why Master started out that talk where he was saying, you know, lead a simple life. That's how he started, and he lists all these things that we don't need. And, you know, where he says also ignorance is the greatest disease in life. And he's saying it because he's saying, once you have faith in God, you will find that all of these other desires, all of these other needs, in fact, the more you get materially, the more you obtain, have materially, or read that anyway, the more fame you have, the more wed you are to being a certain way with your partner. I mean, it can just go on and on. And I could go on and on about it, but every aspect that's other than the simple love of God, that doesn't need a lot of material things, that finds, in fact, I mean, why are there so many saints and sadhus and people, true saints and true sadhus, who don't want to have a lot in life? Because those things take us away from that which is real, that which we can believe in, which we can have faith in, which we know will never let us down. It's in that true love of God, in the remembrance of that we don't have to impose our will, our consciousness, because we'll get stuck with that. There's another, it's not really a story, but it's a little story. But I think in India it might be a thing about a wishing tree. I think there might be more than one story, but if I'm wrong about that, it's okay. But the story that I remember right now of the wishing tree, which is not so surprising, but is of a man, somehow he comes upon this tree and he finds out it's a wishing tree. Whatever he wishes for, he'll get. So first he wishes for this beautiful castle. Doesn't everybody? I think almost everybody does. Gets the castle. And then he wishes for dozens of beautiful women to serve him in the castle. And then he gets that. Oh, he was given 3 wishes. And then he's lying in the castle one night and he hears the lions in the distance in the forest. And he thinks, oh my God, what if one of those lions comes running here and gets me? And of course that was his 3rd wish. And the lion, God heard it as his 3rd wish, and the lion comes running and devours him. And what is that lion in our life? And really, what is the meaning of that story? That all of that which we wish for, that's to fulfill an emotional need, to satisfy our ego, to satisfy our material desires, it's exactly that which comes and gets us. And the only way to live free and clear of doubt, the only way is to realize our true nature in God. And there's no other way around it. So it's interesting, of course, because the way most of us use the word doubt and the way we think of it, it's not at all like this. It's not ignorance. It's not material desire. But just remember, everything that we want that's not God himself, everything is like a material desire. Everything is of this world, not of that world. It's satisfying something here, not for our souls. And as soon as we're here and we can't hold on to things and we can never get enough, or somebody's always going to hurt us, or there's loss, whatever it is, even loss, if somebody says something to you that embarrasses you or ashamed, or you feel ashamed and you lash out, it's at such subtle levels. All of that, then we're not living in God. And loud and clear, these teachers keep saying, anytime you're not with God, it's at it's a statement, a manifestation of doubt, of ignorance, of that one true fact. So our job, if you will, in this life, which we of course have known, but it's a beautiful reminder, is to love God, is to believe in God, is to count on God, to call on God. And I just had an experience, I'm not going to share it now because we're out of town, but out of time, sorry, like this last week where I was in, I wouldn't say the throes of emotion, but I was being reactive, and I convinced myself that what I was thinking was real. I convinced myself. And then I told myself that if I shared what I was thinking with the person I was upset with, that I would be doing them a great favor because they had this huge lesson to learn. Sounds silly, doesn't it, after a 40-minute talk like this? But it's so real in the moment. It's so real. So particularly when we're feeling really attached, really desirous, really emotional, if we allow ourselves to recognize that, boy, we have to stand very still and yell, help. That's really what we have to do. Because as soon as we call on God, as soon as we say, wait a minute, I realize I'm off, you come here. It's right there, because he's right there all the time anyway. We open to it, we get that help. So let me stop here, and let's just see if anybody has comments or questions. I'm going to grab my glasses so I can see.
Years ago when I was in therapy myself, I would talk about feeling broken in some way. And my lovely therapist at the time showed me this. It was a vessel. And it was like an earthen vessel, and it had turquoise in all of these cracks throughout the vessel. And she told me a story, it's a Jewish story, maybe some of you guys know it, about the broken vessel that is then filled with this jewel of God, his essence, and that we are all essentially broken in some way, but God fills that brokenness with his essence. And in thinking back on it, I think we all struggle with this idea that we're broken when we have that kind of reactivity that you're talking about, Shanti, when we feel our doubt. And actually, we're not broken in that sense. It's just that we forget our wholeness. and we just have to then, like you're saying, kind of sync up to that. And the image of us as a filled vessel with the essence of God is actually just coming home again, just trying to come home to that again, over and over again. I think we can't prevent, I think, being reactive unless we meditate all the time. But when we do, I agree with you, just to be able to sync up to who we really are.
Think up to, yeah. It's very well said. Thank you, Joy. Very well said. Yeah. Anybody else? David or Letty? I can't tell from this perspective. David, I think. It's weird. It's just a hand, but it's hard to see who it's coming from. Yeah.
I just wanted to, we started talking about this at the beginning of class, and I thought, not really. I know I have doubt, but I thought, I don't have a lot of doubt. Not in God, not in a spiritual way. But now, you really made me realize what some things that I really have to work on. It made me remember some times where that you just described in a way that, thank you, now I know I have more doubt.
I felt the same way after I prepared for this talk, because we say that word so often, and the word seems so sort of concrete, like it has one definition. But I think that's the whole point that Swamiji makes with these secrets books, and there are many of them, of course, but it's just come to me since offering this class, the depth of these spiritual that just sounds so silly. I can hardly believe I'm saying it. But the depth, the breadth, just the magnitude of these spiritual teachings, it's like, wow, we've been living life in such a small little way, even those of us who have been on this path for as long as we can remember, and even other lifetimes, but you just feel so tiny in a moment, because all of a sudden, whoa, what I thought was doubt, that's just a minuscule part of it. That's just the easy part of it. Now I get to go deep with it. So I had exactly the same feeling today. I have to say that. Yeah. Okay. Somebody raised their hand. Who knew Leonard Cohen? I'm just curious. Who was it? Robbie. Robbie. Okay. Thank you, Robbie.
I knew it, but I say it. I couldn't get it out.
Yeah.
I knew.
I couldn't. It's been a long time since I've heard his name. Well, first of all, I think he died not that long ago, but, of course, I don't listen to that music that much anymore. But he really was brilliant in his own right. In 2 weeks from today is Good Friday, and after a lot of thought and back and forth, we've decided to not have a class that night. So please mark your calendars. Maybe Saikinesh will send you a reminder. No class on April 2nd. Then right after that, the day after Easter, I will be going into a 3-week seclusion. So what we've done already, and it was a fun class, so I'm glad we did it, is we've pre-recorded the class that will be on the 16th. And then Lakshmi and Saikinesh will be here live with you. So they'll be chanting, they'll be meditating with you, they'll be here for questions, discussion, but you will get to hear that talk on mental dullness. And it was quite something. I didn't know where it was going to go, but we all wound up really feeling good about it. So they will see you back here in a month, and I will see you back in 6 weeks. God bless you all.